Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining the September meeting of the Restoring Neighborhoods Task Force. This is Rebecca King with the National Housing Conference, and also in the room with me is Caitlin Snyder with the National Housing Conference. And we are going to have a great presentation today from Gretchen Nichols with Twin City Lisk, a program officer there, specifically working with their corridor development initiative. Before we dive into her presentation, we did want to run through a few policy updates to make sure you were aware. So I'm going to turn that over to Caitlin for the first couple.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. So our first update is around the fiscal year 2017 appropriations. So funding for the federal government will run out on September 30th, and Congress returns this week and will need to pass something before September 30th to avoid a government shutdown. It's kind of widely thought that the government won't shut down, especially in an election year. They want to avoid the chaos of a shutdown. So that means they need to do something relatively quickly. And the question then becomes, how long will the continuing resolution last? There's talk of a 3-month resolution that would put us in December, and then talk of a longer 6-month resolution that would bump us to next year and give it to whoever the new president is to do a new budget. And so Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid has said that Democrats will only support a short-term CR, while some Republicans are calling for a long-term CR to avoid the lame duck spending. So we'll see how this shakes out in the next couple weeks. The caucuses for the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are meeting today. There probably won't be a firm answer of what they'll do, but I think they're going to start these conversations now that they're all back in town. So we'll see the ball rolling in the next couple weeks, so keep your eyes closed for that. And then our next update is around the Make Room campaign. So I've sent it out in a couple of the Friday emails, but the Make Room campaign is aiming to send 1 million messages about the importance of affordable housing to members of Congress between now and Election Day. And their main goal is to get housing affordability on the agenda, specifically entering it into the presidential debate. And so back in August, they launched an organizational version of their website where organizations could create profiles and send messages to members of Congress. And on September 1st, they launched the individual version. So anyone can go in and enter their zip code and be synced with their members of Congress and be able to directly send them messages through the system that they've built. And they have this point system and a prize system, so as you send more messages and if you tweet and send a message, there's different things that will get you points that can win you prizes. But also of note for folks on the call, they have a Make Room advocacy toolkit, and that includes sample letters to the editor, emails, newsletters, social media messages, and all sorts of other fun stuff for folks doing advocacy work. So I encourage all of you to check out their website. It's makeroomusa.org, and it's a very interactive website that you can play around with, and we'll be sure to include the link in the notes. And that's all for me.
Thanks, Caitlin. And then switching gears, I'm going to give a couple updates around loss mitigation and non-performing loans. So on August 25th, FHFA announced a new refinance product from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac for borrowers with high loan-to-value ratios. And these borrowers aren't served because their LTV ratios are too high. So they're going to launch this product in October of 2017, and some of the parameters are that borrowers cannot have missed more than one payment in the previous 12 months, that they do have an income and will receive a financial benefit from the refinance. This product will be more targeted than HARP, but like HARP will not have a minimum credit score, maximum debt-to-income ratio, or maximum LTV. But since it won't be available until October of 2017, FHFA has decided to extend HARP through September 30th, 2017, so that borrowers still have a refinance option. And over 300,000 homeowners could still qualify through HARP. So just something to be aware of that change. And then FHA also announced some changes to its loss mitigation protocols. So it has streamlined their the FHA version of the Home Affordable Modification Program, FHA HAMP, giving servicers more flexibility when evaluating an unemployed borrower and requiring servicers to convert successful 3-month trial modifications into permanent mods within 60 days instead of the average 4 to 6 months. So again, some program changes at FHA to their version of HAMP. And then lastly, we had put it in NHC's Washington Wire and in the weekly Restoring Neighborhoods email about changes HUD has made to its Distressed Asset Stabilization Program, and it's doing its first sale on September 14th after that announcement. So it's offering 20 pools of non-performing loans, and of those 20 pools, 12 will be neighborhood stabilization pools, and 8 will be national pools. Additionally, 5 of those neighborhood stabilization pools will only be offered to nonprofits or local governments, and there will also be the first national nonprofit set-aside. So through the set-aside, nonprofits and local governments can submit loan-level bids for a minimum of 25 loans up to 5% of the pool's total number of loans. Again, these are changes that HUD made to enable more nonprofits and local governments to participate and buy more non-performing loans. So we'll see how that plays out. And we will include all this information in the notes. And with that, we are going to turn things over to Gretchen Nichols with Twin City LISC to learn more about their big picture project. So give us just 1 second while we pull up her presentation. And per our usual, please send in questions, first of all, and send them throughout the presentation. We will get to them at the end. But as they occur to you, please send them through the question box. So just don't forget that we want to hear from you. And with that, I will turn it over to Gretchen.
Terrific. Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound great, at least to us.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca and task force members, for the opportunity to share the story of the Big Picture Project. I'm hoping most of you know LISC, the Local Initiative Support Corporation. The Twin Cities is one of 30 offices across the country doing the work of community development or supporting it, and we've been a part of a network within the LISC system to share models and ideas around transit-oriented development so we can kind of keep building on best practices. And the work we've been doing here in the Twin Cities, I think, has been a case study or an example of some really great strategies that have really come to bear a lot of fruit for moving equitable development forward. I had the chance to meet with some of you on a tour of the Green Line about a month ago, coordinated by Margaret Kaplan here with Minnesota Housing, and point out some of the exciting equitable TOD projects along the corridor. So hello to all of you who may be on the call. And I hope you've had a chance to watch the video about the Stops for Us campaign, which set the stage for all of us to do this work with the Big Picture Project. It's really a tribute to the organizing and the community voice that can really set the stage for some really important work in this area. So at the core of our conversation is the question, how do we get to racial and economic equity? For us, it's about charting a path and defining goals and building partnerships and ultimately tracking results so that we're confident that we are getting to those goals. The construction of the Green Line LRT here in the Twin Cities would run through the same African American community that was devastated by a highway construction project back in the 60s, resurfacing deep distrust and apprehension. Community organizers mounted a formidable campaign called Stops for Us to pressure the transit system to better serve the communities that actually use transit. The campaign prompted the FTA to revise their New Starts funding formula, and 3 additional transit stops were included along the line. In 2007, 14 local and national private foundations joined together to create the Central Corridor Funders Collaborative to unlock the transformative potential of the Green Line in a way that benefits the people and places closest to the line. Through investing in joint action strategies, they made a big difference and helped people tackle big issues together. The Funders Collaborative was a key driver for building the capacity of working groups that engaged a wide range of stakeholders to promote, oops, I moved my cursor, to promote learning, to build shared solutions, and to invest capital in strategies and policies aimed at achieving the benefits. Supporting the range of topical efforts, the Funders Collaborative also provided cross-fertilization between the working groups to explore ways their efforts could intersect and strengthen results for the broader community. So as you can see from this diagram, there were a variety of initiatives that were conversing with each other about what they were trying to achieve and how their efforts might reinforce or further each other's work. By the numbers, $1 billion in transit investment leveraged over $4.2 billion in development activity, and that's only been the past handful of years that the Green Line has been open. Almost 14,000 housing units have been created or are in queue, and it's really fortunate that the Funders Collaborative pushed local partners to get on track ahead of the train. The Big Picture project was designed to define a coordinated plan for affordable housing throughout the 11-mile corridor. LISC was asked by the Funders Collaborative to partner with the cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis to lead the charge. Although we were tasked to address affordable housing specifically, the community process that set the stage for this work shifted the narrative toward creating communities of choice and opportunity, with affordable housing being one component of the goal. Also, to imagine how housing investments could leverage other benefits for the community. It was important to contextualize what was meant by affordable housing. Some of the neighborhoods along the corridor had median incomes of 30% AMI or less. So there were a couple larger pockets of very, very low income communities along this 11-mile stretch, along with some higher end markets. Would housing resources be able to provide the deep subsidies needed for all of these housing needs? It was also critical to understand the range of market areas along the corridor. The stronger markets in downtown Minneapolis and the university area, kind of noted in the red and orange, would likely see investment first. The weaker market areas were projected to see investment possible in 10 years or so further out, and that would indicate the blue and in some ways the green. To address equity, it was important that all parts of the corridor see revitalization from the transit investment. Focused efforts were directed toward equitable TOD projects in what we perceive to be the weaker market areas. A project team was created to vet strategies and agree to a set of recommendations. A series of corridor-wide community workshops allowed broad participation by various stakeholders to shape and inform those priorities. Affordable housing was packaged as new construction and preservation, single-family and multifamily housing, so that everyone could see themselves as part of the big picture. Through the conversation, three core objectives emerged. The first, to invest in the production and preservation of long-term affordable housing, primarily rental. Second, to stabilize the neighborhood and invest in activities that help low-income families stay in their homes, which is more of an ownership focus. And third, to strengthen families through coordinated investments, helping us kind of maintain our focus on keeping multiple bottom lines. The Big Picture project offers a 10-year plan grounded in numeric goals to assess progress. It was interesting to work with all of these sectors and observe that it was very difficult for the government to kind of take a leadership role in kind of creating aspirational goals. I think it was very difficult, certainly for the public sector, to predict the resources looking forward. I think that is in Minnesota and probably many places, it's not reliable to know that we're going to have money moving forward. And government didn't really want to be on the hook for results that they weren't sure they could meet. So we really tried to create a message that this was a public-private partnership and that it wasn't up to the government alone to reach these goals. And in that context, we were able to create a stretch goal which indicated a commitment from both public and private partners to go beyond what government could do alone, and that certainly more was needed. This graph reflects the initial estimate of what these two cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, had envisioned could be done through their 10-year comprehensive plans along the corridor in regard to affordable housing. And that assessment identified 2,540 units for 10 years along the corridor. We knew that would not be sufficient, so we tried to double that to a stretch goal of about 45,000 units. After 5 years, which is where we are today, we are at 80% or almost 3,600 units of our stretch goal. And based on our current pipeline, we will have exceeded our goal by year 6. It has been really a remarkable period of time to track this work, and really incredible to watch what we've been able to produce together. This chart reflects the production and preservation according to the different sub-areas of the corridor. We are trying to make sure that all sub-areas are aspects of affordable housing, but it's really also helpful to kind of track and identify where more effort is needed and kind of get a sense of the larger picture. In addition to observing our affordable housing production, we're comparing it to the market rate production along the corridor, and have been identifying the rate of affordable to market rate. At this point, we're observing 20% of all new units as affordable along the corridor. And this is an improvement to a few years back where it was 1 in 12. So we're actually ramping up and getting into a stronger ability to create the affordable alongside the market rate. This map illustrates where the housing projects are located along the corridor and distinguishes between the market rate affordable and the affordable housing pipeline. As you can see, most of the investment has indeed occurred in the stronger markets of downtown Minneapolis and the university area, with downtown St. Paul catching up. The weaker markets are seeing new projects with market rate just starting to emerge. We are also tracking investments to preserve the affordable housing, single-family housing. And so this set of goals identifies different funding sources and supports that are available to households for the preservation of their housing. And as you can see, we're tracking this as well and trying to make sure we are keeping up to speed. And some of these funds are accessed and seemingly more helpful or available than others, so it's important to stay on track of this as well. And lastly, changes in property values and rental values are being tracked. Property value assessments are showing signs of recovery from the housing crisis, but values are still below the 2011 levels. The rental rates are the most significant change that we're observing, where you're watching increasing 44% from 2011. This is largely driven by an explosion of luxury apartments that have flooded onto the market over the past few years. And this is a very difficult, rental markets are, I'm sure as you know, harder to really monitor and observe effectively. But we are definitely seeing this as the early signs of a lot of shifts in who is able to live along the corridor. The Big Picture project set the stage for significant investments in equitable TOD projects along the corridor. These are just a few of the examples, including a mixed income project, which is the 2700 University site. They are all testaments of the tenacity of our amazing community developers and very creative financing. In addition to housing, there's been much attention to strengthening the small businesses along the corridor. LISC has been a part of a strategy around strengthening creative placemaking and arts and culture as it relates to cultural business districts. So there are 6 districts along the corridor that we have been working with in partnership with the community groups and business groups that have really lifted up these areas as destinations and helped to strengthen strategies that integrate arts into the economic development and vitality of these locations. We do this through a lot of creative strategies that involve tours and helping people discover places and find out more about the unique qualities and aspects of these locations, really lifting up the cultural dimensions and creating a really strong network of interesting events and opportunities along the corridor. In addition, LISC has other resources such as the Corridor Development Initiative to get into some really tactical planning work on specific sites that engage the community about different development scenarios and help them understand why density and affordability are useful to create the kinds of places that people want to see. Through these exercises, they kind of understand a little bit more of how development and real estate works and the difficulty of getting a site to be financially viable. And so they are willing to be more open to incorporating affordable housing and other kind of dimensions that assist with financial gaps to get the kinds of dynamic places that they think would be useful or important for their communities. So connecting people with opportunities has been a strong focus of the Big Picture Project as well as the other initiatives along the Green Line. What we've really walked away from understanding is the importance of getting out ahead. You need to anticipate market changes and try to think about what it is you're trying to create for the communities of the future and how to get there. The importance of the collaborating with a variety of key partners and really meaningfully engaging the community and being a part of that co-creation process so that we're confident that we are working on behalf of all the stakeholders that will be impacted by these investments. That the rental market and homeownership market are unique and different, and we need to be tracking both. They're very interesting as they evolve, and the ability for us to respond in both of those sectors is important. Trying to be mindful of who are the gentrifiers and what is the neighborhood change we're observing. It's important because sometimes people take for granted what's happening, but you need the fine-grained information and stories and narrative to really understand change as it will likely occur and inevitably occur, but also how do we help guide that change moving forward. And always being mindful of who's benefiting as these investments define themselves and create these amazing new opportunities. The transit system, as it's emerging here in the Twin Cities, has been incredibly catalytic for bringing in new investment and really kind of rebuilding places that have been kind of left behind. So, so that's our story. I just wanted to, again, thank you and look forward to any questions you may have.
Thanks so much, Gretchen. I see a couple of questions coming in, and I also have some questions of my own, but we'll start with this one from one of the members of the task force. With the addition of transit stops in some of the lower income areas that you mentioned, Gretchen, did you see any unanticipated gentrification?
So the train has been running since 2014, so we're only a couple years in, and I think we're just starting to get our heads around what are the actual signals of gentrification and how is it that we want to understand that. So in fact, this Friday we're having a large forum around the topic and trying to get a better understanding of what we actually are watching. What we're seeing again is the pressures to the more vulnerable rental community first. People, there's a increasing demand for people to live near in proximity to the transit. So their opportunity, as they're vulnerable with their housing, they're often losing their housing and being replaced. So we're really trying to figure out what can be done to help stabilize or eliminate or mitigate some of those issues. But there's a table of partners that are working together around some of those topics and really trying to collaborate with legal aid services, with landlords, with inspections departments, the different players that are a part of defining how to hold on to these kinds of housing opportunities and help people stay in their homes. So yeah, we're just starting to get our heads around and really building out the relationships and partnerships that can help strengthen that work.
Great, that makes sense. That it would take a little bit of time once the Green Line has been up and running to really see what the impacts, all of the impacts are going to be. We can guess and estimate, but it's still hard to predict at the neighborhood level. So it'll be interesting to see what you learn from your forum.
Yeah, we'll be glad to share. We're going to be building a video, I think, a video documentary about the conversation and bringing in a variety of voices and perspectives as to the issue and what we think is necessary. So.
Cool. Again, folks, please send in your questions, but I have some myself. So I was wondering, you showed us how you're tracking your goals for the different objectives, and in terms of preserved units and new units. And I was wondering how that works for preserved units. Like new construction, it's that you physically built a unit, but how are you measuring preservation?
Okay, so preservation is identified when public subsidies are invested in renovations or updating and asset management. So when low-income housing tax credits are allocated to a project for preservation, that's identified as a unit that's being preserved. So we had a fairly large development called Cedar Riverside, in which $100 million was identified to help preserve and rehab that property. So there's been some significant preservation work, and because there's been a long-standing series of investments in these areas for long-term affordable housing, we wanted to make sure that's the best investment of all, is to preserving what we already have. So making sure we're acknowledging and including that in these investment strategies. So any project then that receives low-income housing tax credits for preservation is included in that number.
And are there state or local funding sources in this work that are kind of unique to Minnesota and Minneapolis and St. Paul? Or kind of models of state or local funding that other places should think about replicating?
I think most of our funding sources are what people would perceive as more of the traditional type, meaning the tax credits, both the 9% and 4%, tax increment financing. The city of Minneapolis has a housing trust fund. So I think there are pretty standard funding strategies that we have in play. I think what you're starting to see now is that move toward more creative and innovative finance strategies. So pulling together equity funds for preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing, the creative mezzanine loan product that LISC has created for mixed income that helps bridge the subsidized LIHTC to the market portions of the project. I think we're now starting to delve into more of that thinking, and we're always open to ideas. If anyone has some great ideas too.
Questions? I'm curious to hear about
the relationship between St. Paul and Minneapolis, and it seems like in many ways they're, called the Twin Cities, so they already have a unique relationship, but just how that's worked with two governments working together on a big project like this.
That's a really great question, because this was interesting challenge in that it's two different cities and two different counties. So we were working with with a lot of different governmental agencies and partners. It was kind of a presumption at the front end that the cities would kind of really work together to define some common policies for the corridor, that we could kind of merge our strategies so that it was more seamless between the cities to help incentivize development along the way. But what we found is that the two cities kind of have different kind of approaches and cultures, and so they kind of have their own strategies and thoughts on policy, and didn't really combine efforts to unify along the corridor. Because most of the corridor runs through the city of St. Paul, the city of St. Paul was probably the most invested in defining how to really operationalize and implement a lot of these ideas. So, and the city of Minneapolis has multiple corridors of transit development, so their attention was spread to a variety of other locations as well. This was the only corridor in St. Paul that they had currently operating. So, so it was interesting. Some of our assumptions in the collaborativeness between cities was kind of proven not to happen, but I think it was important for both cities to be at the table and participating in this conversation together, so they could each kind of take back what they could to their own efforts.
Right.
The other part of it is the county side, which in the Twin Cities, we have 7 counties. Hennepin is kind of much more robust in their dedication to transit-oriented development and have a lot of resources and capacity set up to help lift that work up. And Ramsey County is not so much on the St. Paul side, so another really distinct environment for the county's participation and their ability to help support a lot of this work.
I think that's probably part of why I find the Green Line project and the Big Picture project so interesting, is that it did kind of work in a community like St. Paul with less transit that was newer anyway to transit and TOD and kind of the impacts and potential. And I think we're, hopefully we're kind of heading to a place where more communities are exploring transit options and can really learn from St. Paul and do that work, I hope.
If I might, I'd like to offer one more key piece, I think, from our work, was that the role of philanthropy was very important, and they really helped us push ourselves to be really challenging ourselves for more aspirational goals. That I think it was not sufficient to say, well, this is really all we think we can do. We knew we needed to do more. So they really helped us understand the importance and significance and really take advantage of this opportunity together. I think without the funders at the table really driving us to kind of step up and do more, I don't know that we would have gotten to these goals and all of this energy. So I'm grateful for the funders in this work too.
I think that's another great point. When we think about traditional funding and innovative financing, philanthropy is also a key piece when we talk about resources. Well, I think that is it for me and for Caitlin, and I'm not seeing other questions come in. This presentation was really great and really interesting. Thank you so much, Gretchen, and we'll make your presentation available to folks. And again, we'll send out the presentation and the recording within the next week or so. Before we close out, we did want to let you know of 2 opportunities coming in December from NHC. One is the How Housing Matters Conference, which is December 13th here in Washington. This is a free conference, and it has happened in 2014 and then 2011. We're partnering with the Urban Institute and HUD PD&R and a few other folks. And really looking at cross-sector, so health and housing, health and education, and the MacArthur Foundation, health and housing, health and education, and health and economic development. So definitely put that on your calendar. And additionally, the next day, on December 14th, we are hosting our policy conference, Solutions for Affordable Housing. So we are going to be looking at the post-election context and what the politics and policy environment is going to be, but also solutions we want to put forward, a big conversation around housing finance reform. So please mark that on your calendar as well. And just a reminder, we will email out the presentation with a link to our website. All of the Restoring Neighborhoods webinars are on NHC's YouTube channel, so you can find them there anytime. So with that, we will close out. Again, thank you for joining us today, and look for our email, well, from Caitlin on Friday that we send out every week, and hopefully we'll have everything from this meeting in there, but if not, it'll come next week. So, and we will see you next month in October. We have a big agenda for you. We're going to talk to Enterprise about their recent work on renter stability. We're also going to hear from Caitlin about an issue brief she's doing on the hardest hit funds, and possibly a third presentation to be determined. So please tune back in that first Wednesday in October. And with that, we will give you back the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.